Welcome to the Legal CFO.
Welcome to the show where clarity meets profitability. This is the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler, the founder of Net Profit CFO. If you are a law firm owner looking to get a handle on your finances, grow your bottom line, and finally take control of your numbers, you're in the right place. Each episode, Ryan breaks down the business side of law with straightforward strategies to help your firm run smarter, earn more, and scale with confidence. I'm Leann Lyon, and today we are digging into where profit actually comes from in a firm and why it seems to disappear even when revenue looks strong. Hi, Ryan. It's great to see you again.
Yes, thank you for having me and excited for today's episode.
Excellent. So, Ryan, where does profit actually come from in a law firm, and which parts of the business have the biggest impact on it?
Yes, so I talk about this a lot when I speak. I like to, make this as simple and straightforward as possible and really narrow things down. So I'll start with first, we have our sales. I'm sure that a lot of listeners are familiar with that, right? The dollars that we generate and bring in from doing legal services. And then after that, I like to group things into three expense buckets that we've definitely talked about on the show before. First one is payroll. What does it take to pay our people? That's wages, taxes, 401k, healthcare, workers' comp insurance. Wrap it all in there. Second bucket that I always like to talk about is marketing. What are we spending and investing to bring in new cases? That could be things like SEO, your website improvements, right? It could be paid ads, Google paid ads. It could be any other advertising that you're doing. Again, wrap all of that in there in the marketing bucket. And then lastly, I like to include everything else in overhead, and I really see that as kind of the traditional, what does it take to run a brick and mortar, right? That's what I think about. You probably have rent for your office space, utilities, telephones, internet, computer expenses, right? Office supplies, office expenses, right? Like if you were just running, an office space, an office store, that's what I would put in overhead. So if we start with sales and we subtract out those three expense buckets, we will get down to the profits of the business. A lot of times, I'm sure that our audience is familiar with getting a profit and loss. A lot of times you'll get it from your accountant and it'll show sales at the top, and then there'll be a bunch of expense accounts listed. And I think that can be overwhelming. That's why I try to group everything together in a couple different buckets. But again, once you get down to the end of that, we get down to net profits.
And don't forget coffee. You must include the coffee budget.
Coffee's an overhead. Yes.
Yes. I just heard something about submarines that when they run out of coffee, it's a big problem, actually. And they're underwater for like 3 months. It's pretty fascinating.
I had not thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, a submarine ran out, and their productivity dropped by 40% 3 days after the coffee ran out.
That's
So
pretty
law
crazy.
firms need to budget for their coffee as well. So back to here, how is profit different from revenue in a way that law firm owners often just overlook? They don't even see it.
Yep. So revenue or sales, right? Those are interchangeable. That's the total number of dollars that we're bringing into the firm and that we've actually collected that's on a cash basis. So there's two different types of accounting. On a cash basis, if you went to your bank statement and you looked at all of the deposits, assuming that you're not putting in money as the owner, if it was just strictly client payments into the operating account, that would be your cash basis revenue or sales. If you're doing an accrual basis, then it's all of your billings. That would be all of your revenue or sales, right? And so the difference between that and then the profits is, as I explained, we have to take out all of our expenses. So sales is at the top, then we take out all of our expenses, and then we get down to profits. So the difference is by the time we've gotten down to our profit dollars, we have factored in our expenses.
Good. So where are the blind spots?
Yes. I don't know that there's like a blind spot of, hey, I'm spending money here and, this is what's causing me to lose all of my profits. Most of the time, it's just not being efficient in the business and having the right spend in each one of the categories. So, good, a lot of, I know there are other CFOs that, they, or accountants that really focus on, well, cut expenses, right? Just cut expenses, right? And eventually you get down to, well, everything that I have is a necessity and I can't cut expenses any further. And so then you can't, you know, make the business any more efficient from the expense side of things, right? You can't cut everything, then you wouldn't have a business. So again, like I've said, the more important thing is having our ratios right and making sure that there's percentage left over for profits. So what I mean by that is if you look at your sales as 100% of the dollars that came in the door, doesn't matter what the dollar figure is, could be $100,000, could be $1,000,000. And then each one of our expenses, if you look at those as a percentage as well, at the end of the day, there's only 100%. You could spend 110. That would mean you had a loss for the month, right? If you spend less than 100%, that means you're going to have a profit. So if we have 100% is sales and we have 75% of that number as expenses, we have 25% left over for profits, right? And so I think getting the percentages right is really the big key. As a rule of thumb, for the clients that I have and for a lot of the law firms that I talk to, I typically throw out, payroll should be somewhere between 40 and 45% of sales. Marketing could be somewhere between 10 and 15, and then overhead somewhere between 20 and 25. Usually you can put together and figure out some sort of combination of those numbers to end up with 20 to 25% net profits. So, every situation is different. Every circumstance is different. So you might need to tweak those ratios a little bit, but if you can gain some percentage points, like maybe your overhead's not 20%, maybe it's less. With today, obviously, we probably need less office space with COVID and all that. People are working from home. So maybe you can gain some percentage points there if your marketing is more expensive or if your payroll is a little more expensive. But those are the numbers that I would definitely try to work towards that would leave the business a strong net profit at the end. 20% is really a minimum for an efficient business, for an efficient service-based business like a law firm. That's what I would go towards.
Sure. A couple thoughts come to mind for me. First of all, you mentioned, and it's logical, if you cut out expenses, cut out unnecessary expenses, that would seem logical. But are there times maybe where spending more will make more profit? And then the other question is, where does AI fall into this?
Sure. Yep. So I think the best route to go is have the mindset of it's going to take an investment, right? To grow a business and grow a successful business, I believe you've got to invest in tools, you've got to invest in people. We can't be cheap on everything. And if you have something that's unnecessary, like you've started a subscription and then you no longer use it, by all means cancel it, save yourself the money, right? Let's not have a gym subscription and then not go to the gym for 12 months, right? That doesn't make sense. But for the most part, I think most attorneys and law firms, you're on top of that stuff, right? And that probably doesn't exist. And so if you've got an accountant telling you to cut back on your expenses, it's probably things that you need, right? And so again, I think if you've got something unnecessary, by all means cut it, but also know that it takes investing, right? And be ready to spend. And that's part of doing business. And then where I think AI comes in, I think, that's probably going to help you save some money on tools, potentially like legal research tools, right? Things like that. Yes, you're going to have to spend to actually get the AI tool itself, but it might save you money in other areas, make things more efficient. Those are definitely worth exploring. But at the end of the day, I think you're still shooting for 20% net profits or better.
Yeah. So you can look at invest in tools, maybe potentially invest in better I hate to say it, but better people, people who are more productive with their time, invest in your people, and definitely don't cut the coffee. Okay, just saying. Back to the coffee. Can you share an example of a firm that thought they were doing well financially, but then later realized that their profit was being eroded?
Yes. So this is a firm that came to me about, let's see, 5, 6 months ago, November, December last year. And the business was operating at about 12% profits. Now that's with the owner on payroll, right? And we did a financial assessment, which is a tool that I use with potential new clients. And, we went through those numbers and I kind of benchmarked for them. A really efficient business is doing more like 20 to 25% or maybe even 30% profits with the owner on payroll. And so their perspective really changed when I shared, the numbers that I have and the clients that I'm working with, and what a successful profit percentage looks like. And they had looked up some other data online on kind of benchmarking and what it should be. And I think what's really important is perspective there. Just on if there's benchmark data out on the internet, why is it there and where is it coming from? A lot of times it's from businesses that are applying for financing. Why are they applying for financing? Because they don't have good profits and they need money, right? And so, just taking those percentages online at face value of, this is where we should be, right? Might not actually be the number you should be targeting. And, you might need to be better than that, right? We also have a 50% failure rate of businesses in the US in 5 years, right? In the first 5 years. So definitely don't want to benchmark to other businesses. I always tell my owners benchmark to successful ones that I know or benchmark to yourself and always be working to do better. And so, their profits were definitely, kind of getting away from them in payroll and inefficiencies there. They were over that 40 to 45% mark. And that's where, that really brought them down to their 12% that they were at. And they really gained a new perspective by meeting with us and our firm.
So, if somebody wants to understand where their profit is going, which numbers give the clearest picture right away?
Yeah, I think if you're breaking expenses down into buckets, kind of like I've said, and you can probably have your bookkeeper or accountant kind of help you with this. Then you can get a total for the month, like what was our total payroll costs for the month, right? And you can look at prior months as well and divide that by your sales and break it down into percentages. And then I would look at those percentages. I would look at them over time. You could do it for the full of, all of last year if you wanted to, for example. And that gives you a starting point, gives you a place to go and look and figure out, well, if we're off track in payroll, right? How many months are we off track and why? Um, again, looking at all of last year or looking at the first 3 or 4 months of this year, again, gives you a great place to start and figure out which expenses are not online with where we want them to be and why.
So, once those gaps are identified, what's usually the first move that starts to improve that profit, maybe quickly?
Yeah, so definitely it depends on which metric is off. If it's in marketing spend, maybe is that much marketing spend necessary? It's a good thing to evaluate. Are we getting good returns? And maybe for your industry or geographic area that you're in, maybe more than 15% marketing on your sales is needed. If it's, something like payroll, then I would start looking at efficiencies, right? And figuring out, do I have a staff that's really operating efficiently? Am I giving them enough work? Obviously raising the sales dollars dilutes all the percentages, right? If you keep the same expenses and let's just say you had $1 million in sales for the year, if you go to $1.1 million in sales, all of the percentages of expenses, if they all stay the same, get diluted, right? They get smaller. So, the easy lever to pull or what a lot of law firm owners believe the easy lever to pull is just more sales, right? But we've also got to remember that means more work, more clients to serve, and we want to make sure that we do that well, obviously. And sometimes it might mean, more staff is necessary. So those are important things to evaluate, and when you're going in and starting to look at which one of these metrics can I fix or adjust, those are important things to look at.
So, as we wrap up here, you mentioned earlier the statistic, and it's out there, the 50% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. First, does that also apply to law firms? And second what is the cause? Is it traditionally financial that's causing that issue mostly, or is it maybe something else?
Yep. So first, I don't know if that 50% also applies to law firms specifically. I know that that's typically like a Forbes small business study that comes out with those statistics, which is going to include all industries. And then to answer your second question, yeah, I mean, every business that goes out of business is because they ran out of cash. It's because they ran out of money, right? And so, I really believe that's got to be the focus, and not necessarily sales. A lot of times we have a sales culture and people like to share what their business did in sales, and it's kind of a vanity metric. So we've got to start focusing on cash. And I think we've got to have more accounting professionals that really start working on the advisory side of things like my firm does, and helping businesses produce more cash so that they're healthy and have forecasts so they can see where they're going. I'm a firm believer if we had more accounting professionals that understand how cash flow works, working on that side of things instead of tax or audit or other compliance work like with the SEC. I understand all that stuff's got to be done. But if we had more of them working with small and mid-sized companies, we would have less failed businesses in America today.
Love that. Love that. Thank you so much. And to our audience, that is it for today's episode of the Legal CFO. But if you want a clearer picture of where your money is actually going and how to keep more of it, Ryan Kimler and the team at Net Profit CFO can help you break it down and build a more profitable firm. Visit netprofitcfo.com to learn more, explore resources, or book a profit growth call. Thanks for listening, and remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you, Ryan. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.